Welcome to the Modern Homesteading Podcast.
We have allowed ourselves to become so disconnected and ignorant about something that is as intimate as the food that we eat.
Be prepared to grow your own for victory.
God said, I need somebody strong enough to clear trees and heave bales, yet gentle enough to yean lambs and wean pigs and tend the pink-combed pullets who will stop his mower for an hour to splint the broken leg of a meadowlark. So God made a farmer.
Hello and welcome to the Modern Homesteading Podcast. I'm your host, Harold Thornborough, and I'm glad you're joining us again this week. And we have a great one for you today. I'm going to be joined by Robin Follette of alifeinthewild.com. You're really going to enjoy this episode. And before we get into that, let's just talk about a few other things first. If you haven't already, make sure you go to smalltownhomestead.com/homesteading summit, all one word, and sign up for the Mother Earth News online summit. It's going to be free to watch. It starts October 31st, and I know I've been beating this up pretty good, but I think it's too good to pass up. You got some of the best presenters in the space going to be teaching some homesteading things. So, hey, how can I not keep announcing this? So head on over and sign up for that so you'll know when it starts, and you'll get emails on the presentations. And there will be encore presentations as well, from what I understand. If you miss some, you'll be able to watch some of the presentations at the end. Sign up for that. I think it's going to be really good. As far as here on the homestead, boy, I had a great harvest this morning. I've been going out maybe just 2 or 3 times a week and grabbing a few things, and I had a great harvest this morning. I was out there, and the temperatures have kind of went back up a little bit, and it seems like things just kind of came back to life. We had a lot of tomatoes, a lot of green beans, a lot of peppers of all kinds. So I had a real good harvest this morning, and I've been busy making some salsa and dehydrating some peppers and doing a few other things. So, the garden's doing really good still, and we're talking middle of October in Indiana, and it's just kind of amazing to me because in previous years, I've pretty much put the garden to bed for the year at this point, and it still seems to be going strong. So, which I'm not complaining. I'm loving it. A lot of good eating there, you know. So I don't know how yours is doing. I'd love to hear about it. Drop us an email or head on over to the Homestead Front Porch Facebook group. Just type in Homestead Front Porch in Facebook search and find us and ask to join, and we'll get you in there. And there's just a great community of folks in there already, and I think we're well over 800 people in there now. And folks are sharing pictures of their homestead and their gardens and their harvests, and asking a lot of great questions, giving a lot of great advice, and there's just a lot going on in there. And I really want you to be a part of that group. It's our Facebook page for this podcast. But you know what? I do post a podcast in every week, but it's not really the main topic of any discussion in there. It's just a fun place to come and hang out and talk about homesteading. So swing on over and join the Homestead Front Porch. We would love to have you there. With all that aside, let's just jump into the interview with Robin Follette. I'm joined today on the podcast by Robin Follette from alifeinthewild.com. How you doing today, Robin?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing really good. I'm glad to have you on the podcast. I've been reading your stuff for quite a while on your blog. I've been aware of it for quite a while, and I'm sure a lot of our audience is as well. And you're part of our Homestead Front Porch Facebook group, and
that's right.
A lot of people in there, I'm sure, have visited your site. But why don't you take a couple of minutes and just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into homesteading?
Well, I grew up just outside of a small city in Maine and traveled a bit because my father was in the Air Force. We settled back in a small town, and I eventually went to work in high heels and business suits and didn't like it at all. Didn't like being in the city, didn't like living in the city. And when Steve was offered a job in a very small town in Washington County, I'm in Maine, I was ready to go. I'd never heard of the place, but that was okay. I was ready for change. And 3 months later, we were in a small town of 900, and I thought, we're going to live here forever. And within a year, everything felt very close. Our neighbors were very close, and I felt like I wasn't far enough out. So we started looking for some land. And we now live in a tiny town, population 60.
Wow.
Surrounded by woods and water, and we have 45 acres, and no neighbors in sight, but they're not that far away either.
Right.
So it's really nice.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of your homestead really just consists of a lot of hunting and fishing, and from what I can tell from your website anyway, and I mean, you do have a garden and stuff. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your homestead and all the things you're doing there?
Well, we went big fast. I decided that we had to have livestock, so we've had goats, cattle, horses, pigs, chickens, ducks, turkeys. We had a lot. We had animals for milk, we had animals for meat, and we had way too many animals just because.
Yeah.
Something needed to be rescued and rehabbed, it probably came here. And after a while, we had to say that's enough because that gets very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And over the years, the girls grew up. They're grown women now, and we don't have their horses anymore. Kept them well into their old age. And it's quieted down a little bit. Was a market farmer for 10 years and enjoyed that very much. But when our youngest was graduating high school, if there was any time to change, that was a good time.
Yeah.
So I thought about it for a while and got up one morning in March and said to my husband, I think I'm not going to market farm this year. I'm going to write full-time and give it an honest try. And he said, whatever you want to do. So our garden is, over the years, has dwindled down to about 1/4 of an acre.
Mm-hmm.
We have high tunnels, and I use one that's 1,000 square feet and grow year-round. Another one is just on the side. After you have them anchored into the ground, you don't want to pull them up. So you find another reason to use them.
Yeah.
So we dry our firewood in one of them, and the third one, the small one, is a grape arbor. So you have to be adaptable when you're a homesteader.
Well,
so
yeah, your growing season is a lot shorter than mine up there too. So it's you have to pretty much have those high tunnels up there.
We don't depend on being frost-free until June 1st, and then usually the first week in September we have our first killing frost. So it's pretty short.
Yeah, that's a completely different setup than what we have around here. That's for sure. I mean, you pretty much grow everything though. Just anything that can be grown in the Midwest, you can grow up there.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Especially with the greenhouse.
If I can't do it outside, If I can't do it outside, it goes in high tunnel.
Do you have any, do you have an orchard or fruit trees and things like that as well?
We do. We have apples, one peach tree. We'll see if it survives our winter and the deer. Apples, plums, cherries, and then the grapes, raspberries, and we have a lot of blackberries, but they're all wild, so we don't have to do anything with those other than go pick them.
Well, how much of your 45 acres is wooded?
We actively use as far as the house, the gardens, and we have a pond where we raise rainbow trout. That's about 3 acres, and the rest is wooded.
Okay, wow, yeah, so you got foraging and hunting is definitely a big part of your homestead for sure then.
A big part of it, that's right. I have game cameras out now watching for, we live in an area that doesn't have many deer, so I'm watching for a buck because we can't harvest does. And to date, it's pretty slow. We've seen one, and that's it. But we have a lot of bear.
Yeah, so you already took a bear this year, didn't you?
I did. I put in 60 hours between tree stands and a ground blind in 2 places. We started off strong with 10 different bears coming to my site, and by opening week, it was down to 3. And we had so many mushrooms and blackberries and apples that they didn't need to come into our site for anything.
Yeah.
But at the end of the 3rd week, I said, that's it. The first thing that shows up is mine, as long as it's, an ethical animal, as long as it's not a cub. And she walked in and, all the 60 hours of work and sitting and waiting was over in 3 minutes. So
then
pretty anticlimactic. But
yeah, well, then the hard
work
begins, right? You have to process that animal and
right.
all that. Yeah.
Right.
Now, did you take her with a bow or a gun or?
No, with a rifle.
With a rifle?
A rifle. We have, we're 3 weeks into bow season, and I haven't had a chance to get out and hunt with my bow yet. but I have until the end of the regular deer season. So I'm hoping to take my first deer with a bow this year. We'll see.
That'll be fun. Yeah, I enjoy bow hunting. I haven't seen anything. I haven't been out a lot. I've only went out, I think, 4 times, and I haven't seen anything yet. So hopefully, fingers crossed.
I'm envious of your hunting seasons and the number of big, beautiful deer that you have. We don't, we have big deer, but they're few and far between.
Really? Yeah. See, I was just kind of assumed that. I mean, I've been up that way a couple times, and there's a lot of woods up there. I just assumed the deer hunting was pretty good up there.
I'm at the very edge of the state, close to the Canadian border on the coastal side, and our forest harvesting has been drastic. So their habitat needs some time to recover. But if you go further north, it gets better, and the southern part of the state is pretty good.
Yeah, okay. Well,
We have great moose habitat.
Really?
Yeah.
A lot of moose,
The harvesting that they do is perfect for moose. They like the young growth. They like the tender saplings, and so it's really good for them. But not so much for the deer.
So you almost don't really have to raise any livestock because of the hunting. I mean, you take a bear and a moose a year, and that's a lot of meat.
Yeah, well, we haven't had a moose. That's by lottery, and we haven't been drawn for it yet.
Oh, okay.
We have friends who live on the reservation who can hunt every year, and they do share very generous with us. So there aren't too many years that we don't have moose meat.
Yeah.
But as far as raising our own, a couple of years ago we raised a couple of pigs. This year we're having a pig raised for us, and I'm just raising Cornish cross chickens and some broad-breasted white turkeys, and that's it. We won't have to do much else.
Yeah, well, that's enough, isn't it? That's a lot of work.
That's enough. Right. When you put a bear and deer and the moose that we're given, the pork that we buy, a pig is less than 2 miles from here, and add in the fish, the partridge.
Yeah. I was getting ready to say, I've seen you post quite a bit about fishing and stuff, too, so I imagine it's a lot of that in the freezer as well.
There is. I grew up with a fishing rod in my hand. That's my favorite.
Yeah.
And if I had to choose between, I'm definitely better at putting food on the table with a fishing pole than I am a rifle. But that's all right.
Well, that's good. That's how large is the pond? Now, do you just primarily fish your own pond, or do you?
We don't fish our pond very often. The rainbow trout, there's no inlet or outlet, so it's spring and rainwater filled. Which means we do there are bait fish, but we still have to do a little bit of artificial feeding, and they don't taste very good.
Okay.
It's fun to throw the food in and watch them. It's fun to catch them now and then, but they're mostly there for our amusement.
How large is your pond?
Oh, it's small. It's maybe 30 by 50.
Oh, okay.
It's not very big. It's very deep. It's 22 feet deep on the deep end, so it's very deep. Well, yeah, with our winter, we need room for the fish to be able to swim.
Yeah, that's true. And think about that.
We're surrounded by lakes and streams and ponds, so there's no loss of places to fish.
Yeah, that's a great addition to the homestead, or if you can get, have that access close, for sure. And it sounds like you really have way more property than you actually even need for what you do, but there's nothing wrong with that. It keeps the neighbors a little bit distant anyway, right?
Well, it does, and being out here in the middle of nowhere, we don't have many neighbors to begin with, but having extra land, even though we don't use it, is insurance that we're not going to have neighbors who are too close to us.
Right, yeah. And, to me, there's just it's kind of a proving point that so many people think they have to have 50 or 100 acres to homestead, and then you talk to people who have 50 acres or 40 acres or even 20 acres, and so much of the time they're only using a couple, 2 or 3 of those acres to actually homestead on.
That's right. And you can grow, as far as plant food, you can grow a lot of plants in a small amount of space. You don't need a lot of room for them.
Right, and depending on what livestock you're going to, there's a lot of smaller livestock that doesn't require a lot of space either. If you're going to go cattle or something, you obviously have to have a lot of room, but there's a lot of livestock that can be raised on 2 or 3 acres.
We don't have much for pasture, and we don't have land that we really could turn into pasture. It's quite wet. So instead of having grazing cattle, we had browsers. So we had Belgian We had Belted Galloways, Scottish Highlands. They don't need a lot of pasture. They can do just fine in the woods.
Yeah.
And boy, they're great at, and so are the goats. They were great at clearing out.
Yeah, no kidding. Kind of a double benefit there from them, huh?
It is. And we had pigs that you could fence into the woods, and they were happy rooting around out there and having a great time.
Yeah, I would think that would be some of the healthiest meat, too. You got a forest foraging pig would have to be a really healthy meat.
It is, and it has a great flavor because they're not just being fed pellets. They had all kinds of stuff, all the scraps from the garden and whatever they found, and they were happy pigs.
Yeah. Well, what inspired you to start a website and start telling the world what you were doing?
I've been writing since I was 10 years old, so that's more than 40 years now. And when I first heard about these things called weblogs, I thought, no, I don't have anything interesting to say in that. Nobody cares about that. But then I started reading other blogs and got hooked and thought, well, I can share my story and I can share some of what I know. And then I met Elliot Coleman, who is the person who taught me how to use my high tunnels. And he said, we have to share what we know so that other people can benefit from it too. And I said, that's it. I need a blog. And from there, it's just kind of grown, and I enjoy it a lot. It's kind of like sitting down and talking to friends, and then I can go catch up and see what other people are doing. It's been great, and it's led to some writing jobs for me.
So you actually met Elliot Coleman?
Yeah, I've been to his place a couple of times.
Really? Okay, wow. He's received quite an education there then, huh?
Yes. He has one simple rule: stay out of the way. So he's probably not going to stop what he's doing while you're there. But as long as you follow along, and if you know what you're doing, pitch in and help. Otherwise, keep asking questions, but stay out of the way. He'll tell you everything he knows. He's very generous with his information.
Yeah, that's great. So you decided in those footsteps to kind of do the same thing, share knowledge with the world, and kind of inspire some people, and go down that same path in a sense, huh?
Well, and it's a little less scary when you can read. It's one thing to read a book and have book knowledge, but when you're reading from somebody who's doing it on a daily basis and sharing some of their major screw-ups, you think, well, that didn't go well, but nobody died, so I can do this.
Yeah, there's always next time, as long as you still got your fingers.
That's right.
Wow. Well, it sounds like you got quite a bit going on there. I mean, enough to keep you busy for sure. And have you found you've had to, well, you already said earlier, you kind of got rid of some livestock just because it's a little too much. But you talk a little bit about that. I mean, what do you think about having to scale back at times? So many people think always got to be adding,
And that's what I thought. I thought real, quote-unquote, real homesteaders had to have this, and this, and you had to do certain things to be a real homesteader. And over the years, I've learned that's not true at all.
Yeah.
There were 4 of us in the house, and now there are only 2 because Taylor and Kristen have grown and are on their own. So we don't need all that meat. We don't need all of the vegetables. So scaling back, it seemed like the natural thing to do, but it's not that easy. When you've put all this time into putting in fence posts, fencing in areas of the woods for the browsers, you've got this huge garden. You can't just let the garden go back on its own because it becomes a weedy mess. So there's almost as much work involved in scaling back as there is to growing.
Yeah.
And it's another learning curve. You're learning as you're expanding, but you're also, it's almost like learning all over again. There are things you forget. I don't know how many years it took me to start 24 tomato plants instead of 300. It's habit.
Yeah.
It's an adjustment.
I know that my wife always cooks dinner every night, and we had 3 daughters that we raised, and she was just always used to cooking these big meals every night. And then when all the kids grew up and moved out, it was like, how do you cook for 2 people? Nobody knows. We're trying to figure it out still, and they've been out for a couple of years.
Yeah, we're still trying to figure it out. Taylor's been out for 5 years now, and I still think, no, 2 potatoes is enough.
Yeah, we'll eat leftovers for like 3 nights in a row just because we overcook every time.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is great when it's the busy season. And
yeah.
when you can just go to the refrigerator and warm something up,
I
that's
agree.
great. But it does get tiresome 3 or 4 nights in a row.
Yeah, it's just funny how that is something that you just do. And I imagine it's the same way with anything, with the homestead too. It's like, how do I just raise this many chickens, or how do I only, grow this big of a garden? Yeah, I could definitely see it having the same effect.
It is. Well, and as homesteaders, a lot of what we do is all about food and having to make the adjustment, not just how much do you cook, but how many chickens do you raise? Do you really need a whole pig, or is half a pig all right? It's a lot of relearning.
Sure. And I noticed on your site you post a lot of recipes as well, and that's a big part of homesteading as well as cooking. I mean, it ain't just about raising it and growing it. I mean, if you really don't know how to prepare it, what good is it really, right? I mean, I see you do that a lot.
Right. What's the point? And a month or so ago, I started hosting a cooking show in the Midwest. And it's all cooking wild game, fresh food. So I have to do something with it. So I started sharing more recipes, and sometimes it can be kind of scary. You have all this food, and what are you supposed to do with it? It needs to be simple. Everything can be delicious and simple at the same time. So I keep it as easy as possible. And when you're homesteading and you're growing all this great food, it's easy to be a good cook when you're starting with the best ingredients.
Sure. Yeah, and I found that to me, food preparation is one of the most important skills when it comes to homesteading, because I know the first couple of years I was, going down this path, I threw away a lot of food because we just couldn't use it or didn't know how to use it in the right ways, and we only knew maybe one way to cook it or prepare it, and it just got wasted a lot of times because we didn't know yet. We're still learning.
It's a big learning curve, and it's a lot different when you're throwing out something that you've worked very hard to raise or grow compared to not giving it a whole lot of thought if all you had to do was go to the grocery store and buy it.
Yep.
Sure, you had to work hard to earn the money to buy that, but that's not quite the same as throwing out an uneaten chicken leg from a chicken that you raised.
Yeah, it just feels wrong for sure.
It does. It gives you a connection to your food that you probably didn't have any idea existed before you started doing it yourself. Right.
Yeah, I'm looking over right now. I went out this morning and I picked a bunch of peppers off my pepper plants, and it's like, what am I going to do with all these? And I look over and my dehydrator's going, right now. I sliced them all up, put them in the dehydrator. You ain't going to eat all those right now, so you got to do something with them, and you start just developing a system where you do something with it. You're either going to blanch it and freeze it, you're going to can it, you're going to dehydrate it, you're going to do something with it, or because you know how wrong it feels to throw something away that you've put so much hard work into, for sure.
That's right. That's right. And it's actually a lot of fun to be able to use it. I started cooking a pork roast today. I started preparing it, and Taylor's here for the weekend, so she finished getting it together for me because I had something else I needed to do. And it's a pig that we raised, that we knew, with garlic that we grew, and when all is said and done, there won't be a scrap of that roast that goes to waste. Nothing will go to waste. The dogs will get the bones because they're not dry, brittle bones. Even if we have to throw the excess tomatoes into the chicken pen and let the chickens and the turkeys eat them, it's still not wasted.
Now, do you do all your own processing of your animals as well?
We do our poultry, but when we had cattle and had pigs, we sent those out.
Big job.
We're just not equipped for it. It is. It's a big job, and we're not equipped for it, and it's not a job that we're particularly good at. And I used to think, back in the days of real homesteaders do all these things, used to think if I raised it, I also had to butcher it. And after a couple of years, I realized there are people who are a lot better at this job than me, and they should be the ones doing it. You don't want to ruin a cut.
Yeah. And you can take a lot of time doing that as well. I mean, it can be a pretty time-consuming task. Especially cattle. I mean, that's a big animal. How about the animals you hunt? I mean, do you process any of those, your deer or bear or any of that, or you have processing places around there to do that?
We usually take them to the processor, but this year I wanted to do my bear because I knew I wanted a lot of sausage.
Mm-hmm.
So there's nothing fancy about that. Once you get the back strap out and save that, the rest of it was either going to be burger, sausage, or stew meat. So you can't really ruin that, even if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, right.
So Steve broke it down into manageable sizes for me.
Mm-hmm.
So you go out to the cooler, grab a bear leg, and come in. And he came home one night after I'd been doing this all day, and I said, grinding up a bear was never on my life plan.
Well, you have the experience now. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, I did. But it took me 3 days.
Wow. Yeah. Well, you got it done.
Yeah, very time consuming. I got it done, but if I'd taken it to the butcher, it would have been a lot faster.
Yeah, right. But now you know. Next time you take it to the butcher. No, you.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah. Well, it's nice. It's nice to know how to do those things. If even if you do take it somewhere, it's nice to know how to do it and know that you can do it when you need to.
Well, on the last deer, I thought I was all set to drop it off at the butcher, and I called and said I'm on my way in, and he said, I just had 8 come in, and I don't have room.
Mm-hmm.
So then what do? You either scramble to find somebody else, or you do it yourself.
Yeah.
So having that skill, you can't always depend on somebody else because life happens. So learn those skills. Even if you might not use them often, learn how to do it.
Absolutely. Good advice. Before we get too far away from it, now you mentioned a minute ago that you were doing a cooking show. Is that right?
I do.
Is there some place that people can see that, or where's that at?
It's on the radio. It's in 8 stations, 8 states in the Midwest on 19 stations, and it's part of The Big Wild.
Okay.
Which is a show that's 14 years old. And I took over for Denny Corvo 5 or 6 weeks ago, I guess. And so I don't get to listen to it live. I have to track down a station and be able to hear it, or they'll send me my segment.
Yeah, I wonder for some
later
websites
on.
That they play that online or anything. That.
Working on turning it into a podcast.
Okay. Well,
yeah. And,
let us know when that happens.
I love podcasts, so I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, that'd be great. You have to definitely let us know when that happens.
Right. It's part of The Big Wild, and my segment is called On the Fire. And I've done indoors cooking. I'm going to move outdoors and do a roasted chicken in a Dutch oven with some potatoes and onions and carrots on the campfire. And so I get to have a lot of fun with it. And I do love to cook because, like I said, when you're doing all of this work to raise this great food, it's easy to be a good cook. Absolutely.
They are as big of a homesteading skill as gardening or raising livestock any day of the week, for sure. Cooking is just as important. That's great. Well, it sounds like you do have an awful lot going on there, and I've just been blown away by your website. I love reading your articles. You always have some great articles in there, and I've gained a lot. I enjoy reading your hunting articles and your recipes and all those things. So I know everybody really enjoys it, and we'll definitely have some links to all that stuff. Before we get off here, I just want to ask you: do you have any advice for folks who are maybe just getting started homesteading, or they're thinking about getting into homesteading?
Find somebody who will let you tag along, whether it's in the barn or the pasture or the garden or the kitchen. Reading is very helpful. You can learn a lot, but book knowledge is not the same as hands-on.
Yeah.
So if you have somebody who will take you under their wing and teach you how to do this, or even only let you watch, because sometimes you don't want an inexperienced person having their hands in there because things can go wrong.
Yeah.
Even if you can watch, call the cooperative extension and ask them what they're doing. Our community colleges are doing wild game cooking series, and it's an inexpensive class to take. Learn what you can hands-on before you buy that first piece of land or get that first animal. It's not so important when you kill your tomato plant because it's not tragic when a tomato dies. you don't want to make that kind of mistake with livestock or poultry or anything like that. So learn everything you can beforehand, and don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it, when you first get started, because nobody goes into this knowing everything.
Right.
25 years into this, I certainly don't know it all.
That's right. Yeah, that's good advice. That's great advice. And as much as I love blogs and I love podcasts and all those ways to learn, you're absolutely right. You have to. It's so much easier, and it's definitely gonna shorten the learning curve to be around some folks that are already doing it, and to get some real hands-on experience with it. Absolutely, that's good advice.
It breaks down that romantic notion that comes with the idea of homesteading. And it's all lovely and wonderful until you're holding the sick goat in your arms or something awful happens. So that kind of mental preparation for the things that can happen, that's a big one too. Yeah,
you're right. I've had that experience as well, and jumped into some livestock blind and wanted to try this, wanted to try that, and I've had to bury a few animals that weren't even worth eating.
Right, it happens. It happens. Start with chickens and work your way out.
That's great. It's great advice. So, well, how can people find you online? I think we've mentioned it a couple times, but go ahead and shout out your information there.
The blog is alifeinthewild.com, and there are links on the main page to Pinterest and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. Okay, I know I'm all over the place. Where is I am?
You're in all those important places, right?
Yeah. Well, I had to narrow that down too. You think you have to do it all, and then you realize, I have my favorites and the ones that work, and you cut back. So that's what works for me.
Absolutely. Well, that's great. Well, I know people are going to run and check out your blog and all your great articles, and it's been a real joy having you on the podcast today, Robin.
It's been great. Thank you for asking me.
You're welcome. Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Robin, and I'm going to put links to Elliot Coleman's website, thefourseasonfarm.com, whom she mentioned, and some of his books that he's written. Just a great resource and full of information for the homesteader. I think it'd do anybody good to check out some of his stuff. He's got some really good stuff out there. And also I'm going to put a link in the show notes to the Big Wild radio show and especially Robin's program, On the Fire, and just a list of some stations that's playing on. So you can check that out if you want. And, of course, I'll have links to all of Robin's stuff on there as well. And if you haven't been over to her website, livefinthewild.com, run on over there and check it out. Some really good stuff she's written on that blog. And, again, Robin is in the Homestead Front Porch, so if you want to chat with her in there and join up, and she's in there quite a bit and sharing information and being involved in the discussions. So you can talk to her further there for sure. Hey, I really appreciate you joining me again this week. And we're going to have a few of these. I got a few interviews with some different homesteaders. Some of them have websites, some of them don't. And that's okay. We're just here to hear about what folks are doing on their homesteads and learn from them and be inspired by them. And I know I enjoy hearing about what other people are doing, so I think you will as well. And until next week, happy homesteading, and God bless.
Thanks for listening. To see the show notes for this podcast or listen to other podcast episodes, go to smalltownhomestead.com. There you can also read our blog, connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Google+, and take advantage of the many resources we make available to help you along in your homesteading journey. Please share this podcast and help us to carry out our mission of helping others to homestead today for a better tomorrow.